The Minnesota Vikings may have just sparked the most unexpected quarterback drama in the NFL. A former No. 1 overall pick, Kyler Murray, suddenly becomes available and signs for almost nothing. But Minnesota already has its supposed franchise quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. So why bring Murray in now, and what does it secretly say about McCarthy's future? The moment the Minnesota Vikings selected J.J. McCarthy with the 10th overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, the message felt clear. Minnesota believed they had finally found their future quarterback. McCarthy had just led Michigan Wolverines football to a national championship and carried one of the most impressive winning records in college football history. To many fans, he looked like the perfect long-term successor to Kirk Cousins, who had been the steady face of the Vikings' offense for years. The organization was ready to turn the page and begin a new era. At first, the plan seemed simple. McCarthy would develop slowly while the roster around him stayed competitive. But the NFL rarely follows simple scripts. Before the rookie quarterback even had the chance to prove himself, everything took a sudden turn. During the 2024 preseason, McCarthy suffered a meniscus injury that ended his rookie year before it ever truly started. Instead of easing into the league, he spent the entire season watching from the sideline, learning the system but unable to show what he could actually do on Sundays. Ironically, while McCarthy was recovering, the Vikings found unexpected success with another quarterback. Sam Darnold stepped into the starting role and delivered the best season of his career. Under head coach Kevin O'Connell, Darnold suddenly looked like a completely different player. The offense moved smoothly, the passing game opened up, and the team piled up wins. Minnesota finished the season with one of the strongest records in the conference, and for a moment, it looked like the franchise had accidentally stumbled onto the perfect solution. That success created a fascinating dilemma inside the organization. The Vikings could keep riding the hot hand with Darnold, or they could stick to their original long-term plan and hand the offense to McCarthy once he was healthy. In the end, Minnesota chose the future. They allowed Darnold to move on in free agency and committed to their young quarterback. It was a bold decision, one that showed just how strongly they believed in McCarthy's potential. But belief doesn't always guarantee results in the NFL. The 2025 season was supposed to be McCarthy's official arrival as the Vikings' franchise quarterback. Instead, it quickly became a test of patience for the entire organization. Expectations were high, the spotlight was intense, and every performance was judged against what the team had just experienced the year before. And that's when the story began to take a completely different direction. Because once the games actually started, it became clear that Minnesota's gamble on McCarthy might not be as safe as they originally believed. The 2025 season was supposed to be the moment everything finally clicked for the Minnesota Vikings. After spending his entire rookie year recovering from injury, J.J. McCarthy was finally healthy and ready to take control of the offense. The organization had already made its decision. They allowed Sam Darnold to leave despite his breakout season, choosing to stick with the long-term plan. The message was clear: this was McCarthy's team now. At first, there were flashes that made the decision look promising. In his debut, McCarthy showed the same confidence and playmaking ability that had made him a national champion with the Michigan Wolverines football. He led an impressive comeback victory that immediately energized the fanbase. For a moment, it felt like the Vikings had found their next franchise quarterback. Analysts pointed to his mobility, his calm presence in big moments, and the potential for him to grow inside head coach Kevin O'Connell's offensive system. But the optimism didn't last long. Just 1 week later, McCarthy suffered a high ankle sprain that forced him to miss several games early in the season. The injury interrupted his rhythm at the worst possible time. When he eventually returned, the offense never quite found its consistency. The timing with receivers was off. Drives stalled in critical moments, and the mistakes began to pile up. Statistically, the numbers started telling a difficult story. McCarthy appeared in only 10 games during the season, and the production simply wasn't what the team needed from a starting quarterback. He finished the year with more interceptions than touchdown passes, and his completion percentage remained below expectations. For a roster that had playoff ambitions, the inconsistency became impossible to ignore. The struggles affected the entire offense. A unit that had looked explosive the previous season suddenly dropped near the bottom of the league in key categories. Turnovers became a constant problem, and several close games slipped away because of late mistakes. Instead of building on their momentum from the year before, the Vikings found themselves fighting just to stay in the playoff conversation. By the end of the season, the results were hard to ignore. Minnesota finished with a 9-8 record and missed the postseason entirely. It was a dramatic step back from the 14-win campaign they had just experienced. Even worse, the team ended up stuck in an awkward position in the draft order, too good to secure a top quarterback prospect, but not good enough to compete for a championship. And quietly, inside the organization, that disappointing season started to raise an uncomfortable question. If the Vikings were built to win right now, could they really afford to wait for McCarthy to figure things out? One of the most surprising developments of the offseason started quietly, but it quickly grabbed the attention of the entire NFL. The Arizona Cardinals made the shocking decision to move on from their former franchise quarterback, Kyler Murray. Just a few years ago, Murray was viewed as the centerpiece of the Cardinals' future, a dynamic playmaker drafted first overall in the 2019 NFL Draft, and a quarterback who brought excitement every time he stepped on the field. For a while, that vision looked completely justified. Murray made the Pro Bowl twice early in his career and quickly built a reputation as one of the most electrifying dual-threat quarterbacks in the league. His ability to extend plays, escape pressure, and create explosive moments with both his arm and his legs made him one of the most difficult players for defenses to contain. Over the course of his career, he piled up more than 20,000 passing yards while also adding thousands of rushing yards and dozens of rushing touchdowns. Very few quarterbacks in modern NFL history have been able to impact a game in so many different ways. But the situation in Arizona slowly became complicated. Coaching changes, roster instability, and injuries began to derail the momentum that Murray had built early in his career. At times, the Cardinals looked like a team on the verge of competing in the NFC. At other times, they struggled to find consistency on either side of the ball. As the seasons passed, the conversation around Murray started to shift. Some analysts began questioning whether he could still become the long-term answer for the franchise, while others argued that the organization itself had failed to build the right environment around him. Eventually, the tension reached a point where a separation started to look possible. Reports began circulating that the Cardinals might be willing to move in a different direction at quarterback. At first, those rumors sounded unlikely. After all, teams rarely walk away from former #1 overall picks who are still in their prime. But as the offseason progressed, the speculation grew louder. Then came the moment that truly changed the landscape. When Arizona officially decided to part ways with Murray, the entire league suddenly started asking the same question: where would he go next? Teams around the NFL quietly evaluated whether bringing in a quarterback with Murray's talent could completely transform their offense. That's when one destination kept appearing in conversations among analysts and insiders: the Minnesota Vikings. Several reports suggested that Minnesota had strong interest in exploring the possibility. The idea immediately sparked debate across the league. Some fans believed it would be a perfect opportunity for the Vikings to add a proven playmaker. Others wondered how it would affect the development of their young quarterback. But as the rumors continued to build, one thing became clear. If Murray really did land in Minnesota, it wouldn't just be another quarterback signing. It could completely reshape the future of the Vikings' offense and possibly change the direction of the franchise overnight. The most surprising part of the entire situation isn't just that Kyler Murray became available. It's the way his contract situation suddenly created one of the most unusual opportunities any NFL team could ask for. And for the Minnesota Vikings, it may have felt like discovering a loophole that almost never appears in professional football. Hear why. When the Arizona Cardinals originally gave Murray his massive contract extension, a huge portion of that deal was fully guaranteed. That guaranteed money doesn't simply disappear if the team moves on. Even after parting ways with their former franchise quarterback, Arizona is still responsible for tens of millions of dollars tied to that contract. In simple terms, Murray is already getting paid whether he plays for the Cardinals or not. And that's where the situation becomes fascinating. Because that guaranteed money is already locked in, Murray doesn't need a massive contract from his next team to earn elite-level pay. He can sign a short-term deal for the veteran minimum while still collecting the money Arizona owes him. For another team, that suddenly turns a former #1 overall pick into an incredibly affordable option. In fact, reports suggested Murray could realistically sign for around $1.3 million, the veteran minimum for a player with his experience. For most quarterbacks with his resume, that number would be almost unthinkable. This is a player with Pro Bowl appearances, thousands of passing yards, and the kind of athletic ability that can completely reshape an offense. But because of the way the contract works, the Vikings wouldn't need to take on the financial risk that normally comes with a quarterback of Murray's caliber. And that matters even more when you look at Minnesota's situation heading into the offseason. The Vikings were dealing with serious salary cap pressure. Like many teams trying to remain competitive, they had several large contracts on the roster that limited their flexibility. The front office had already been forced to make difficult financial decisions just to stay under the cap. Every dollar suddenly mattered. Signing a traditional franchise quarterback would have required committing $30 to $40 million per year, which is the going rate for elite passers in today's NFL. That kind of investment can reshape an entire roster, forcing teams to sacrifice depth at other positions. But Murray's situation changes that equation completely. Instead of committing huge resources to one position, Minnesota could potentially bring in a highly talented quarterback for the cost of a backup special teams player. That kind of financial advantage allows the team to strengthen the offensive line, improve the defense, and keep key playmakers around their quarterback. And when a team that already has stars like Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson suddenly gains that kind of roster flexibility, the entire balance of the NFC can start to shift. Which is exactly why so many analysts began describing this situation as something close to a cheat code for the Vikings. For years, one name inside the Minnesota Vikings organization has quietly built a reputation across the league: Kevin O'Connell. Since becoming Minnesota's head coach, O'Connell has earned a label that very few coaches ever get in the NFL: a quarterback whisperer. And when you look at the track record, it's easy to see why. Long before arriving in Minnesota, O'Connell had already been part of several successful quarterback stories. During his time with Washington, he worked closely with Kirk Cousins and helped guide one of the most productive stretches of Cousins' early career. Later, as part of the coaching staff with the Los Angeles Rams, he helped coordinate an offense that allowed Matthew Stafford to deliver one of the most memorable seasons of his career, a campaign that ended with a Super Bowl victory. But O'Connell's real reputation exploded after he took over the Vikings. Almost immediately, he began getting the most out of the quarterbacks in his system. Cousins produced some of the most efficient football of his career while leading several dramatic comeback victories. Even when injuries disrupted the season, O'Connell kept the offense competitive by adjusting his system to different players under center. At one point, the Vikings managed to win games while rotating multiple quarterbacks, something that rarely happens smoothly in the NFL. Then came one of the most surprising quarterback revivals in recent memory. When Sam Darnold arrived in Minnesota, expectations were modest. Darnold had struggled for years with previous teams, and many analysts viewed him as a temporary solution rather than a long-term answer. But inside O'Connell's offense, something changed. The system simplified reads, emphasized timing routes, and allowed Darnold to play faster and more confidently. The result was a season that completely reshaped the narrative around his career. That success reinforced the idea that O'Connell had a unique ability to unlock quarterbacks who had struggled elsewhere. But there's an interesting detail that often gets overlooked. Nearly every quarterback O'Connell has worked with shares a similar style. Cousins, Stafford, and Darnold are all primarily pocket passers, quarterbacks who rely on timing, structure, and strong arm talent rather than elite mobility. While each of them can move within the pocket, none of them are known for being true dual-threat weapons. And that's where the situation becomes fascinating. If Kyler Murray joins the Vikings, he would be the first true dual-threat quarterback that O'Connell has ever built an offense around. Murray brings a completely different dimension to the field. His speed allows him to escape collapsing pockets, extend plays that would normally end in sacks, and turn broken situations into explosive gains. That kind of mobility forces defenses to defend the entire field differently. Suddenly, read option plays become possible. Quarterback draws become real threats. Defensive linemen have to hesitate before rushing aggressively, knowing the quarterback could take off at any moment. And if a coach with O'Connell's reputation for quarterback development finally gets his hands on a weapon like that, the Vikings' offense might be capable of something the league hasn't seen from them before. When news about Kyler Murray potentially joining the Minnesota Vikings started circulating, the first reaction from many fans wasn't excitement. It was confusion, because Minnesota already had a quarterback they invested heavily in, J.J. McCarthy. Just 1 year earlier, the Vikings used the 10th overall pick in the draft to bring McCarthy to Minnesota. That kind of investment usually signals a long-term commitment. Teams don't spend top 10 picks on quarterbacks unless they believe they've found the future face of the franchise. At the time, McCarthy seemed like the perfect fit for what the Vikings wanted to build. He had just led the Michigan Wolverines football to a national championship, and his leadership, mobility, and winning record made him one of the most intriguing quarterback prospects in the entire draft class. But the NFL has a way of moving incredibly fast. After McCarthy missed his rookie season with a preseason injury, the Vikings entered 2025 hoping he could finally take control of the offense. Instead, the season became a difficult learning experience. Injuries disrupted his rhythm, and inconsistency followed once he returned to the field. The flashes of potential were still there, but the overall production didn't match what a playoff-ready team needed from its starting quarterback. That's what makes the Murray situation so complicated. On paper, bringing in a veteran quarterback with Murray's experience might seem like a simple insurance policy, another capable player in the quarterback room. But the reality is rarely that simple in the NFL. When a former #1 overall pick and Pro Bowl quarterback enters the building, the dynamics of the entire position group change immediately. Even if the organization publicly frames the move as competition, the pressure on McCarthy would increase dramatically. Instead of developing at a steady pace, he would suddenly find himself fighting to keep the starting job against a quarterback with far more experience and a proven track record in the league. And history shows that situations like this can change a young quarterback's career very quickly. Several recent examples illustrate how fast the league can pivot. Quarterbacks who were once considered cornerstone draft picks have lost their roles after teams brought in more experienced alternatives. Once a franchise starts exploring other options, the timeline for development often becomes much shorter. For McCarthy, the arrival of Murray would create a moment of truth. It wouldn't necessarily mean the Vikings have completely given up on him, but it would signal that the organization is no longer willing to wait indefinitely for him to develop. Instead, they would be prioritizing immediate results. And if Murray performs well in O'Connell's system, the conversation about Minnesota's long-term quarterback plan could shift even further, leaving McCarthy in one of the most uncertain situations of any young quarterback in the league. For J.J. McCarthy, the situation in Minnesota could quietly become one of the most uncomfortable storylines in the league. Just 2 years ago, the Minnesota Vikings viewed him as the long-term answer at quarterback. A top 10 draft pick, a national champion from the Michigan Wolverines football, and a player the organization believed could lead the franchise into its next era. But the NFL rarely waits patiently for potential. If Kyler Murray does arrive in Minnesota and performs the way many analysts believe he still can, the entire timeline for McCarthy could change almost overnight. A quarterback with Murray's resume is typically brought in just to sit quietly on the bench. Former #1 overall picks with Pro Bowl experience usually expect to compete, and if they win games, teams rarely go back to an unproven option. That's where the pressure starts to build. If Murray steps into head coach Kevin O'Connell's offense and produces strong results, the Vikings could find themselves facing a difficult decision. Do they return to the young quarterback they drafted to be the future, or do they stick with the veteran who is delivering wins right now? For a team that already believes its roster is strong enough to compete in the NFC, that choice might not be as complicated as it sounds. Winning in the NFL changes everything. If Murray leads the offense effectively, pushing the ball downfield to stars like Justin Jefferson and keeping the team in the playoff race, the Vikings could easily decide to extend the partnership beyond a single season. With the salary cap flexibility created by his unusual contract situation, Minnesota would have the ability to negotiate a longer deal if both sides felt the fit was working. And if that happens, McCarthy's role becomes much less clear. Instead of being the developing starter of the future, he could suddenly become a backup quarterback waiting for another opportunity. In the modern NFL, that kind of situation often leads to trade discussions. Teams around the league are always searching for young quarterbacks with upside, and a former first-round pick still carries value, especially if another franchise believes it can develop him in a different system. Of course, nothing about this scenario is guaranteed. Injuries, performance swings, or unexpected developments could quickly shift the picture again. The Vikings might still believe McCarthy can grow into the role they originally envisioned for him. But if Murray thrives in Minnesota's offense, the organization may find itself facing a reality that happens more often than fans realize. Sometimes a franchise drafts a quarterback expecting him to be the future, only to discover that the future arrives in a completely different way. In the end, the NFL rarely waits for anyone. One year, J.J. McCarthy looked like the future of the Minnesota Vikings. Now with Kyler Murray entering the picture, that future suddenly feels uncertain. Draft position, college success, and long-term plans can disappear quickly if results don't follow. If Murray thrives under Kevin O'Connell, Minnesota may have accidentally found its next franchise quarterback. But if the gamble fails, the Vikings could find themselves right back in quarterback chaos. And in today's NFL, that kind of risk can reshape an entire franchise overnight.